Welcome back to the Pause and Effect podcast, where we delve deep into the world of pets, their health, behavior, and their nutrition. I'm Dr. Carra, your host and a dedicated veterinarian. Today we're in for a treat as we welcome a special guest, the one and only Matty, the dog trainer. Not only is he an expert in dog training and behavior, he's also a prolific online course creator and content producer. Welcome back to the Pause and Effect podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Carra, and I'm here with Matt,
Hey
the dog
again.
trainer. Hello again. Thank you. We had such a fascinating conversation that tapped into some of your background, but off air, we've been talking a little bit more, and I thought it's so informative. It's nice to know what your origin is and where a lot of your knowledge and your inspiration comes from.
Yeah, so over time I've learned to actually share a little bit more about the story, and so we'll go there and we can see where it goes. But I've always grown up with animals, and I've actually been training dogs for over 20 years, believe it or not, which is saying something. Thank you. So yeah, I started when I was really young, around 8 or 9. And what had happened is I had this really cute little wide-haired dachshund that my dad and I went fishing the one day, and he had a boat and we would go off at the old Durban Ski Boat Club. And on our way back, there were some guys that had this really young puppy, and they were selling him for 40, or selling her for 40 rand. And my dad was like, okay, we can't, we'll take this pup and we'll go to the SPCA. Needless to say, the dog never went to the SPCA, it moved in. And she was a little wide-haired dachshund that we named Penny. Well, we call her a wide-haired dachshund because that's what she looked like, but whether that's what she was or not, who knows. And yeah, I grew up with her, and I had a little Jack Russell, and one day my gran had invited me to this SPCA fun day in Belito. And I took Penny with, and we had this fancy dress thing of you're supposed to make your dog look alike. So I made myself try to look like a wide-haired dachshund and dressed her up. And I can't even remember. I think we got third place there or something. It was very sweet. But what had happened is they had a dog agility demonstration, and I was called out the crowd to handle somebody else's dog, as something to experience. I don't know. There was something magic when that happened. I remember the dog's name. It was Sonic. It's still a friend of mine, Uta's dog. He's passed now, but and there was I never had felt more alive. And I don't know, connection. And it's a very bizarre thing to fall in love with, but there was just something within me that felt intrinsically connected. And I got their number, and I ended up getting lessons with my friend Yuta, and you actually might know her, Taryn Murphy. Yes, of course. So exactly. And yeah, so Taryn, and really over time, I started training a lot with Taryn and my wide-haired dachshund that was now doing agility, right? Going over these little jumps. Yeah. I was the youngster that was in the sport, and I think my parents were like, oh, here goes another sport. And they're this isn't just a baseball bat or a cricket bat, it's a living, breathing animal. And through that, I really started getting a connection with dogs. And then I really got the bug to start competing. And even though I was a little wide-haired dachshund, she was actually doing not half bad, you know what I mean? And I then, for my birthday, my parents said that I could get a border collie, my first border collie, to compete with. And her name was Tango. And she was a catalyst for so many different things in my life. At that point, I was going through some really tough stuff. I was in a mainstream school and then was put into a remedial school, which, hindsight 2020 is almost like a strength, you know what I mean? But at that time, it also makes you feel like you're stupid. As a child, that's what I had internalized. And being able to work with these dogs was the first part of where I actually started seeing a little bit of light and connection. I was struggling to make friends, probably didn't have the best social etiquette, and it was just really, really difficult. And even when I was younger, my mom was having me do OT, and we had these brain gyms, and I was doing so much stuff just to be able to get my brain to function correctly so I could go back into a mainstream school. And what was really interesting is when I started doing agility was the coordination that came from having to be able to have to do agility. And there's my coach Taryn she'll still laugh about when I was younger and I'd have to stand on her feet, right? And she would hold my hands and she would have to guide me through the motions, right? And then there was, I don't know, maybe 6 months into this, there was just something that connected, like the left and right hemispheres of my brain actually connected, and I could start processing like logical information along with creative information. And yeah, I myself with my border collie, we were really young. In South Africa, we don't have a junior category, so I was competing against adults.
Oh, wow.
And I went on to win nationals, KwaZulu-Natal championships, and then made it onto the world team one year. I competed at the junior world championships, where I finished 7th in the one round and 9th in the other. And from there, like my sort of agility career kind of exploded. And even then I was still in high school. I was still struggling through a lot of things. And I came across this course that was called Mindscape. And at that time, the agility for me was very much around competition, right? It was like training every single day. And I had a great relationship with my dog, but I'd taken this course called Mindscape, which was all about developing your intuition. It was like a two-day course, and there was just something that once again changed, that was so dynamic, on where it wasn't just this agility for me was no longer just about competing and winning. It was about this partnership that I had with my dog. And since then, that's been such a part of what's driven me forward, of like having this beautiful relationship where there's like true connection, and it's not just like, oh, we have a dog at home or my dog competes, or just the family dog, but where there was this actual intrinsic connection that's really difficult to even describe with words. And then I went into university and I wasn't focusing so much with my dogs, and I went on to study filmmaking, and from there got started into a marketing career and so on. And the dogs kind of, I wouldn't say they didn't take a back seat. I always adored my dogs. And then just before the pandemic, Tango passed away. She got older, and I had another border collie at the time, and I was training her, and it was just a really, really difficult time. And I was down in Cape Town working on a project, and there was a fire in Massey informal settlement, and it had wiped out like 300 homes. There was like hundreds of dogs displaced. It was just like crazy.
Dreadful.
Yeah, really hectic. And the rescue center that services that area was asking for help, and I went there and helped. And there was something that just reignited my love for being able, I mean, it's horrific to deal with animals in that situation, but of that desire to give back. And didn't really process it, and only at that time did I really process what had happened with me and Tango, because we had such a hard connection. Losing her, I just didn't...
Just suppressed and carried on.
Yeah. And I didn't say this earlier, but she's like when I was younger, and when you're going through stuff like being ADD and ADHD and having these labels, and even to the point of being diagnosed on the spectrum, which is interesting because I don't necessarily see everything the same way as other people do. I see things as pictures. So when someone says something, I can see the entire film playing out, right? But not necessarily the words or the actual scenario. So it's always been difficult to process that. And I think that also brings in the complexity of not always being able to process emotions that well. And so I really had hardened myself up with that. And when I went into working at this rescue, it was heartbreaking for me, but at the same time, something like totally unlocked. And from there, it's just been a drive for me to start helping and moving out of just the dog agility, but helping pet dog owners have that amazing relationship. And what had come from that was working in a rescue. You can realize that there's a problem, that people are getting dogs, right? And for whatever reason, they're ending up there. And I think it's not the only reason, but probably the biggest social issue here is people not having the education to be able to help the dogs. When I say help the dogs, like train the dogs.
But does it not start with that desire of, particularly, I see it here in South Africa, of having access to the most beautiful breeds?
Yes.
And people select based on a look,
yeah,
and not necessarily a behavioral trait. Or
Yeah.
And I think, like I am to blame for this. I loved bull terriers. I've always thought they were fascinating looking dogs. I quite like their spunk.
Yeah.
And I'm the owner of a bull terrier, and she has been really, really challenging.
Yeah.
And obviously now, and that's from someone who is involved and is educated in sort of pet care. And you make that mistake because you go, oh, they're so cute, or they're so beautiful, or they need a home, you're doing them a favor, or whatever it may be, and you end up with ultimately a problem, rather than going, this breed is probably not suited for my lifestyle.
And and I don't think people should be made wrong for that, right? It's literally a product of circumstances, of education, right? We don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't even have judgment for people that have to surrender their dogs to a rescue center. What I'm moving towards is like, let's educate people so that they can make better choices, right? So that in the future, don't do that again. You know what I mean? Or
Absolutely.
understand what you're getting into. And so many times these dogs are getting put into rescues because of that, one of people wanting beautiful looking dogs, or they rescue a dog but they just can't handle it, right? Or the dogs just get completely out of control. It's devastating. I've been in a couple of consults where you can kind of feel like, either the dog's going or I'm going, in the family dynamic,
Absolutely.
like where it's like, it's hectic, and with my work is what I'm wanting to do is have a softer approach where it's not just like, oh, dog training and fix this problem, but really for people to build a relationship with their dog, like the relationships I have with mine, where they're not just a dog, but you actually see another being. If you actually take a moment, I'm not saying stare into a dog's eyes because it's not necessarily the best. No, they can sometimes get like the best. You might not get the best response from them, but there's that. If you take like a soft gaze and you just acknowledge that there is another being there, it just shifts.
Good for both of you.
Exactly, and it just shifts your perspective. It's quite
I
beautiful.
love that. But I want to take this opportunity to ask your opinion on this emerging trend of becoming a fur parent, having a fur baby. And I say that loosely because we've obviously had a lot of discussion about this through our podcast, but I'm very much having a family pet. Because I'm very concerned about the behavioral aspect. Having a dog sleeping in the bed is all well good, but when they start attacking the husband, because they don't want him to get in the bed, they want to be with you. So what are your feelings about, so obviously it's education from saying connect, but connect only so far. Like, where is the balance?
So I don't think that you need to put in a boundary for connection, right? Like, I think where you truly want to step into acknowledging that's the same thing with a human being that you truly love. You don't need to have a boundary on the connection, but you might have some boundaries around some rules of things that work for you and don't work for you. Your dog sleeping in your bed or not is a boundary, but it doesn't make you less connected to them if that's your relationship. Do you get what I mean? Like, that's not, for me, that's not a deciding factor. I have no issue with dogs sleeping in the bedroom, or on the bed, but for a prime example with that, some dogs might be totally chilled with it. Other dogs, it might be considered resource guarding, right? Where they're now resource owning the person. So it is when I say that, and thank you for bringing it up, so it is clear, when I'm saying have a deep connection with your dog, I'm also not promoting having a connection where you're not like acknowledging that you're living with a different species, right? Like, there needs to be that where you've got the boundary, because what that's also going to happen is if you coddle them and you give them, and it's not about giving them too much attention, but if you do stuff like every single time you come home and you give a big fuss and you're like, oh, I'm so excited to see you and all of that kind of stuff, that's when you start creating behavioral problems like separation anxiety, or they jump up each time when they see you. So it's a very fine line. But I think you can have both.
So would you put, I'm trying to sort of relate it to sort of some personal boundaries that people also struggle with. But, it's like having a friend and you're saying, I'm here every time, like when you need me, call me. And they just, harass you at 10, 11 o'clock. They're your friends, but they harass you. And so the boundary is like, well, okay, I need to maybe say to you, listen, I need to get some sleep now. Let's chat tomorrow. So the same kind of boundaries you put in terms of connecting.
Absolutely. It's like you don't love your friend any less.
Yes.
But you say you cannot phone me at 11. Like you can phone me at 11 p.m. at night if there's an emergency. You know what I mean? But you can't phone me at 11 p.m. to say because you've had 3 too many margaritas and you're like drunk calling. You know what I mean? Like it's like that's not the fun. But
so it's boundaries generally.
Generally.
And do you find people who have bad personal boundaries have bad boundaries with their pets?
Not always, but what I have found is people that are not willing to lead, right? And by lead, I don't mean dominating or like power over. I mean truly just giving you the dog the correct information. People that struggle with that struggle with their dogs.
Or give mixed messages.
And are not consistent. Exactly. Hot and cold, that for me is a big problem. But I don't... I often see what happens is people that struggle with people relationships often have dogs. Doesn't always necessarily equate to having behavioral problems all the time. But I think if those people aren't willing to lead their dogs, that's when stuff really goes, goes a little bit south.
And now, a word from our amazing sponsors who make the Pause and Effect podcast possible. To make a promise implies trust. To make a pledge creates expectation. And to make a commitment initiates responsibility. For more than 25 years, we have made it our mission to take the ifs, buts, and maybes out of premium pet food. That's why our experts put the best science behind our food, so your pet's health is put first. That's why when you seek value, we strive to give you more, like protecting your pets with our free accident benefits. And when you need great tasting food, our fresh meat taste delivers. You see, what sets us apart is not one thing, it's all these things combined. Because we understand that when it comes to your pet's health, you don't want doubt and uncertainty. You want absolutes, the absolute best given your means, like premium veterinary quality food of real value that doesn't cost an arm and a paw. So rest assured that any claim we make, we stand by. It's our commitment to your pets and our promise to you. In fact, we're so confident in what we stand for that we have made the ultimate promise to you. It's called the Ultra Pet Promise, 100% money-back guarantee, a no ifs, no buts, and no maybes kind of promise. We call it our satisfaction guarantee. Welcome back to Just for Pets. You're with Dr. Carra.
Hi, Doc. It's Jackson the Jack Rossi here, and boy am I itchy.
Are you on a hypoallergenic diet?
Hyper what now?
Changing to a special diet will really help. And Just for Pets have a massive range. And flea and tick medication, special shampoo.
Ooh, how quick can you get some?
Order today and we'll deliver pronto.
I feel better already.
Justforpets.co.za. Vet approved, pet adored. Get it all to your door.
Let's get back to our conversation on the Pause and Effect podcast. So, I was very grateful. I was given some great advice in terms of, I'm talking now, the bull terrier.
Yep.
So and it's one of the biggest gifts. And there's a lot of problems, still got a lot to work on. But we have this agreement.
Yeah.
Piglet.
Is her name Piglet? Oh, I love that.
She was very piggy when I first took her on. She was 5 weeks.
I love that.
And very, very sick. That's what happens when you let your child name your dog.
Was this Charlie? I love that.
Charlie naming Piglet.
Yeah.
So one of the things I got right very early on with the help of a dog trainer was that she sat for affection. So obviously I loved we spoke about it before in our previous podcast about high value rewards and then ultimately sort of being able to kind of tone it down. And so she now knows, yes, she obviously, if I've been gone and I've been away and I come back, and she's super excited, that escalation of energy. But generally she now knows that in order to get love, she has to sit. Rather than that jump, jump, jump.
Yep.
And that kind of small little change has made such a difference to just the quality of arriving back and not having her jump over people, and because they're strong.
Absolutely.
And so this is why I love what you're doing, because those things, and this is a small example, ultimately, like even say a dog that would bite you or whatever and get excited. Those are the kind of things that can end up in a situation where you may have to euthanize the dog. If they do that to a stranger or a child.
Yeah.
And so, there are some sort of life-death things.
Situations, totally, yeah.
Absolutely. So with the work that you're doing, what are your limitations? Where do you say, okay, look, this is, like you said before, I'm very happy to train, I'm very happy to advise, I'm there for people, but this is now beyond me.
Yeah, I mean, I would never put a boundary in for someone asking me that question, right? Like you can bring me any case and I'll tell you whether I can help you with it or not. There's, when it's happened once, that's something that I can potentially help you with. But when it's something that is progressed over time and it's always something that is such a case by case basis.
But
it's so difficult to
maybe a biter.
A biter,
Let's use a case example. Obviously, because it's very scary when we have. There are certain colleagues who will be like, no, that dog needs to be put to sleep. And if they bite a child, the responsibility. If they, can you imagine the consequences if you have a dog that wants to bite and they're not in the right kind of care? That is too risky to not advise. Euthanasia.
So it is tough, but there's a couple of different reasons why a dog could bite. And so I wouldn't be able to make a broad statement without knowing exactly what was going on. But one of the reasons could be fear aggression. So something is triggering the dog that's fearful, and then the dog is biting, right? Another one can even be excitement, which is generally not so much a bite, but it's that mouthing, right? Which can also get out of hand of where they like nip, where they jump up and like grab the hand, and it's not really a bite, but it's some breeds of dogs will just do
mouthy.
that. Another one can be frustration, believe it or not, that if a dog can bite out of just frustration. And the other part could potentially be, and this is the one that's difficult, and often you can try medication, but this is where you really need to speak to a veterinarian and a animal behaviorist. Is there is sometimes, it's very rare, I've only seen it once before, where there's something neurologically wrong with the dog, and that it's like unrehabilitatable, and it would just become like too dangerous, even for their own dog. And usually those cases display a dog in a very unhealthy life in general. Do you know what I mean? They don't have a good quality of life because they're reactive to everything, and that for me makes sense of then you need to look at making a decision like that. But one nip, however, I need a prefix with this, with everything, is if the dog is doing something like that with your family, you've really got to manage the situation of where that until you get a behaviorist and promptly. Not like, I did it once and then, okay, it's done it a second time, now we need to get help. First time, you need to get help, and you also need to manage the situation so that that dog doesn't have access to the kids or to the family member that they've bitten and so on, and you have to reach out immediately. I think that is always something that is so difficult to really say, do this. But,
I've taken you to the total extreme, and I'm gonna reel back.
No, it's
but
fine.
I didn't want to miss that opportunity.
Yeah,
but for me, if you list on your hands, what are the absolute fundamentals that you would say, like you would expect everybody to be able to do? And I know you touched on this. I know some of the answers with your dog. So, in terms of what are the basic commands that you need to get in place as a priority when you get a dog?
Okay. You need to have a sit, a down, and a stay. Those are like a solid stay. But what you really need in the beginning are those blocks that we talked about in part 1, where your dog can be calm, focused, has impulse control, because all of those behaviors aren't really going to help you when there's a big distraction if you don't have those foundational pieces in place. So to circle a little bit back to your aggression question, if you had a dog that was calmer, more focused, optimistic, learned how to learn, how much of that aggression could be reduced? Right. So I'm not saying that it would fix it, but if you had all of those elements in place, there's a good chance that the 9 out of 10 is coming down to a 4
which is manageable then.
Exactly. So those for me are crucial across any behavior or any dog that you're bringing into your house is that you need to have those foundational steps put into place. Then it needs to be a sit, a down, and a wait. And then being able to walk on leash, big one, that I think to take your dog out for exercise. In South Africa, we're lucky. A lot of people have really big properties.
But you'd advise people try and get out as much as possible.
Totally.
Like,
It's
burns that energy and that
totally,
mental
but also like
stimulation.
they can go on like a sniff safari. I call it like a sniff safari,
Love
right?
that
When
term.
they go out and sniff, do you know how mentally stimulating that is? Even if it's
They read the newspaper.
Exactly. Even if it's like for a 500-meter walk versus the sniffs that they get at home, and just being able to go and have that exploration is so good for them mentally.
Instagram for dogs.
Exactly. They like find out all the
TikTok.
different stories that
Yeah.
are going on. And then, of course, a recall. For me, it might even be the most important thing to have is your dog to come back when like called. There's obviously people that have dogs that don't come back when called don't generally let them off leash. But, even if you did, or if they get
escape.
loose, run out the front gate. You need to be able to say, come back here before they
Get hit by
it can
a car.
be exactly. It's so dangerous, or go like wandering off somewhere. So those for me would be my like the top behaviors you have to teach, and all actually aren't that complicated when you do it in that like game-based approach where you just strategically layer them on top of each other. You can do it in 2 to 3 months, like of 2 to 3 minutes a day of lessons. You know what I mean? It's not, when I say dog training, I don't mean going and training for 30
hours
minutes a day. It's like literally 3 minutes maybe. And my favorite thing to do is train with my dog's food allowance for the day.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, so they actually have to work to get their dinner. Not all of it.
Yeah.
Like at the end they get their full dinner, but especially people that feed kibble-based foods, it's really easy to use straight out of their dinner bowl, right? And this is that transfer of value we talked about in part 1, is the value for dinner and the excitement for dinner and for breakfast now gets transferred into the training session and the behavior. So if you do that and you put in and you teach those core behaviors,
Love it.
you're A for away. And it reduces the reactivity of your dog and the likelihood of aggression, etc., when you have those layers put in.
Absolutely. So your feelings on the impact of spaying or castrating dogs, is it something that you would advise? What kind of impact does it have? When should you do it? Obviously, it's a big thing because when we see very strong, high levels of testosterone, it can obviously maybe impact behavior. And
It totally can, but also the jury's really out on that research. There's like, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of contradicting pieces of whether at what age it should be done, whether it really has a significant change or not. However, for me, unless you are a registered dog breeder in South Africa, the Kennel Union of Southern Africa, or if you're wherever else in the world through your kennel union, then maybe that's a reason to keep your dogs intact. I do not see any value after a certain age. I mean, you probably would have a better understanding of this, but I think around after the first season, get your season, or about 12 to 18 months with the male. Once they finish
to mature, and
then spay and neuter. There's no point, because then people are having puppies that we've got more than enough dogs in rescues. I'm not against having purebred dogs at all. I compete with pedigree border collies, so I'm not against it at all. But if you just want a family pet, you really don't need to keep them intact or breed with them. You know what I mean? Like really,
or risk that.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you're approached by someone and they say, "Look, I've got my Rottweiler. It's entire." Would you say, well, one of the first things you can do is to castrate him, because it reduces that, maybe improves the focus or reduces that kind of escalation?
Beyond dog training, I would say do it full stop. Do you know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Regardless of behavior or not, because we've got way too many dogs. We don't need more. This influences the conversation of what we were talking about with the rescue anyway. But yes, I do think that, it may help. To be 100% honest, like I've seen dogs that have been castrated, behavior hasn't changed. I've also seen dogs that have been castrated, behavior changes, massive difference. So it's individual, worth a shot. Do you know what I mean? Like, unless you've got plans to breed with them, which I just advise probably shouldn't do that anyway. I think, do it. Yeah.
And for people who want to take on rescue animals,
yes,
it's really tricky, because obviously, we spoke about learn the breed.
Yep.
We're going to try and figure out the
Yep.
behavioral sort of characteristics and the potential problems. And now you're going to a rescue and I say, I mean, you may find a pedigree dog and that's fine. You can Google.
Exactly.
But you may find a crossbreed.
Exactly.
How do you pick the correct rescue from a behavioral perspective, and how do you get it right?
Look, I don't think there's ever getting it right. You know what I mean? I don't think there's ever getting it right.
How do you minimize the risk?
Because, well, even like when you're getting a pedigree dog, you can't guarantee what the behavior is going to be like. You know, one puppy from the same litter can be so different from another puppy. So you have to know with what you're getting into is you're training the dog that's in front of you, right? So when I was saying
it's a non-judgmental way of starting
out, if you can get the information, it's just going to inform the way that you're going to train. If you see a dog that you're like, you know, like when people rescue dogs, they often go into it and they're like, okay, they just fall in love. They know that there's the connection, or for whatever reason, the circumstances, they're getting that dog. Try and find out what the dog is. I mean, you can do, I know, like for people, you can do DNA and me. Yes. You can do that too to find out some more information if you really want to. But otherwise, what you're looking at is a being in front of you, and you're training that being with the best that you can. And with bringing home a rescue dog, really shouldn't be that different from bringing home like a pedigree puppy. However, I think you need to, especially when you're dealing with a dog that's maybe potentially quite a bit older and has been through some stuff, you need to know that training is going to take longer. You more than likely are going to have problems that you can't dog train away. And you're going to have to accept that and manage that.
So can you train an old dog? Can an old dog learn new
absolutely,
tricks?
You absolutely can, but there's going to be finicky things of like, you know, this dog doesn't like men with hats. Yeah. Say, for example, like it's a thing, like or like a specific look of a person. You can do all the dog training through the, you know, like for years. Your dog might never get over that. You're just going to have to manage it. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't get a rescue dog just because you might get one little quirk here or there. It's like, what if you could actually see the beauty in it, and that you're now helping this dog live its best life? Understanding it. Yeah. And that's what being a dog parent is where you can understand the dog that you have.
Like you would love your child for all their quirks.
Their quirks, and and there's nothing you can do about it. And you can do stuff to change, like you can do stuff to change it and try and improve it, and make them more confident and more optimistic around men with hats. But you also might have to accept that it might not change, and that's okay. I mean, I've had that with my dogs where there's certain things that they're not okay with that, and there's no point in trying to push them through, because what a lot of other people might do, and there are dog trainers that say for example, your dog is afraid of hats, right? There is a way that you can train your dog to get over it, but it's something that's often done, and it can get done quickly, but it's called flooding. And I don't think it's a very ethical thing to do. You can imagine, say, what are you really afraid of? Snakes, spiders?
Yeah, I'm not that keen on spiders.
Okay, not that keen on spiders, but just imagine for a second you're terrified of spiders, or you're terrified of snakes,
I don't
right?
want them crawling on me,
right? And you're like, you wouldn't even touch one, right? And I said, oh, you need to get over this fear, so I just put you in a tank with them, right?
Yeah.
Right? So there's a point where you would stop responding, right? And you go...
just apathetic.
Exactly. And that's exactly what will happen, right?
I'm either going to die or I'm going to...
And this is what happens in dog training, right?
Okay.
Where people go, oh, you see, the dog's now over it. I'm like, no, the dog is actually flooded and can't respond. It's gone, like, you've done now so much damage by doing that. And that's more than likely how the dog's even ended up in the situation of being fearful of a man with a hat or whatever. So... yeah, that's what I mean. You've got to sometimes accept it, because there's ways around it. Is it okay to train your dog like that? No, because you wouldn't do that to a person.
No.
Yeah.
No. Absolutely fascinating. I love all of this. There's so much to learn. And I mean, you teach a lot of these principles through your new training app.
Yes.
And can you please let the listeners who missed out on past one, although I'm sure they're going to go back and listen to it, can you give them some information on what it is, how to get access to it, how to get access to you, and how we can start being better pet owners?
Cool. So, well, I'm Maddie the dog trainer on Instagram. So that's Matty the dog trainer on Instagram. And if you go to maddiethedogtrainer.com, you can get onto our waitlist for when it opens. It depends when you're watching this. It might already be open. If it is, you can jump on there. And yeah, and also if you've got any questions, I know we've talked a bit about behavioral things, and it's very complicated to talk about without having a specific case study.
Absolutely.
So if someone has any of those questions, please feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. Even if I can't specifically help you, or if like my app can't help you, I'm going to give you a reference to, even if you're in a different country, of organizations that can put you in contact with behaviorists or specialists, or there's a lot of people in the dog training industry that are specialists in specific problems. So
you
there's
can
like
direct them.
Yeah, you get people that like specialize in their entire businesses around helping dogs with separation anxiety, which is beautiful because it's an exceptionally complex topic, because there's like an infinite amount of variations of what could be causing it, and you get people that can specifically help you with that. I mean, we're going to have courses in our app that are going to help with that, but when there's severe cases, it's you can't necessarily just get on your phone and fix it.
And I'm going to ask for a parting gift. I want to understand how to not solve it necessarily, but some of the things I need to do to stop dogs barking, because obviously we live in quite a tight community.
Yes.
And barking is one of the things I'm asked about all the time.
Yeah.
And I haven't got a clue how I would even approach that.
It's actually quite simple. First of all, you would need to understand why your dog barks, right? So there's really three things. Excitement, because you've just come home and like they're so happy to see you and they're going off their rocker. So there's that. The other one is fear. So they either fearful of something, or they're being protective, and that could be the reason why they're barking, or frustrated. So they want something and they're frustrated that they can't get it. Or there's other versions of frustration, but those are the reasons.
So it's not that they like their own voices.
Well, I think
sometimes feel the dogs
I
do.
think it's excessive. We're talking about excessive barking.
Okay.
I think it's very normal for dogs to bark, and people shouldn't be upset because their dogs bark. Right?
Continuous barking
but it's
in the middle
excessive,
of the night.
Yeah, that's you have to then understand like what is going on. So then the next thing is to try and figure out which one of those they are. But the step before that might even be understanding what is the trigger. So what is the thing before the thing? So the thing is like what actually triggers the dog to do this. So if you're looking through those three lenses, either fear, excitement, or frustration, it might give you some indication of what the triggers are. An easy fix is if you can control the triggers, right? Not always possible, right? It could be your dog's barking when your neighbor drives in through the gate.
Or the monkeys.
The monkeys.
Can't control those.
And it's so funny, like Missimo, when I'm doing Zoom calls and stuff, and like even my dogs will like bark at monkeys, and then I'm like doing a group class. I'm like, okay, the monkeys are here. I need to go fetch my dogs. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, no, guys, there's actual monkeys. Like, because South Africans got it. But like when I'm with my overseas clients, they're like, what do you mean? No, I'm like, no, there's like actual monkeys. Monkeys, yeah. I'm like on the roof. So yeah, understanding those components first. Then this is what's really interesting is actually if you teach your dogs to bark on cue, so you give it a command or a cue to say speak, right, and reward them for barking. You can then also teach them to do the opposite, to stop speaking, right? So you can say, so you give them the cue to speak, and then as they stop, you go stop, and then you give them a reward, right? So they understand on off, right? And that's really as simple as it is. So you reward for them when they speak, and then when they stop, you give them the cue, stop, or whatever you want it to be to get them to stop barking, and then you reward them. It might even sound a bit counterintuitive, but this was so. Hope I'm referencing the right person, but Carra and Matt, I know that she's a really well-known dog trainer, and she used to be a SeaWorld trainer. And in one of her books, she was describing an issue where they were having a dolphin that during their shows would just dive to the bottom of the pool and would just lie there at the bottom of the pool, and they couldn't get it to come back up, which you can imagine. And way back when SeaWorld was a big thing, it was like it was embarrassing.
Something wrong with it.
Yeah,
it's
like
being mistreated.
Exactly, or something, right? So what they did is they came up with this idea to do that on cue. So they would send the dolphin to the bottom of the pool to lie down for 2 seconds and then come back up, right? And it would be a cue and completely eliminated the behavior. So it's a very easy way to do it.
I'm so glad I asked you.
Yeah. So those are your two solutions: is
That's
figure
great.
out what the trigger is, and then try and remove the trigger if you can. Then you don't have to worry about the training part. That's management. But if you need to train it, teach them to speak. It's a cool little party trick too. And then teach them to stop speaking. So when they're barking excessively,
shut
you
up.
can say, yeah,
Quiet.
quiet. We're polite to our dogs. We don't say
Quiet.
shut up.
Yeah, we don't
But
swear at them.
yeah, I know everyone does, so don't worry. There's like moments in my life too where you're like, oh my word, Jesus, take the wheel. Like,
No, that's great advice. Thank you so
Amazing.
much. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for your time today. It's
Thank
been
you.
really informative. I'm really excited to share this with the listeners.
and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
And I really look forward to us chatting again.
Yes, we'll make it happen.
Definitely.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Today, we've had the pleasure of exploring the world of pets and delving into behavior and training to maximize your pet's potential with our incredible guest, Matthew Cooperwaith, aka Matty the Dog Trainer. His expertise in dog training and behavior, along with his role as an online course creator and content producer, has truly given us a lot to work on as pet owners. It's been a fascinating journey, and we hope you've gained some valuable insights. But before we say goodbye, I want to invite all our listeners to connect with me on social media as the Ultra Pet Vet. Please like, subscribe, and share the podcast. If you have any questions or experiences to share, don't hesitate to reach out. Join us next week for another exciting episode. And until then, give your pets a warm hug from me. Thank you for being part of the Pause and Effect podcast community. We have an exciting announcement to make. We are looking for guest speakers who are passionate about the pet industry and sponsors to support future episodes. Are you an expert in pet training, nutrition, or behavior? Maybe you're a veterinarian with insights to share, a pet store owner with unique experiences, or a pet product inventor. We want to hear from you. The Pause and Effect podcast is a platform for industry professionals like you to showcase your knowledge, experiences, and stories. As a guest speaker on our podcast, you'll have the opportunity to share valuable information, engage with our audience, and have your voice heard in the pet community. Whether you want to discuss training techniques, emerging pet care trends, or the importance of mental stimulation for pets, we want to feature you and your expertise. So, if you're passionate about pets and have something to say, we invite you to join us on an upcoming episode of the Pause and Effect podcast. But wait, that's not all. The Pause and Effect podcast is also seeking sponsors to support our mission of educating and entertaining pet lovers worldwide. By becoming a sponsor, you'll gain exposure to our engaged audience and have your brand associated with the love and care that we have for our four-legged friends. If you own a pet-related business, offer pet products or services, or simply want to align your brand with our pet-loving community, we'd love to partner with you. As a sponsor, your brand will be featured prominently in our episodes and our social media channels. It is a great opportunity to showcase your offerings to a dedicated audience of pet enthusiasts. So whether you're an expert in the pet industry looking to share your knowledge, or a business seeking to reach a pet-loving audience, we want to hear from you. To apply as a guest or to inquire about becoming a sponsor of the Pause and Effect podcast, please contact me at drcarra@pauseandeffect.co.za. Get in touch and let's discuss the various opportunities. Thank you for joining us today. We can't wait to welcome our future guest speakers and sponsors to the Pause and Effect podcast. Remember, every episode is an opportunity to celebrate our four-legged friends.